So yeah, actually the reason I contacted you was, so the whole purpose of the e-commerce club is that, to provide some more information about students about e-commerce in general, because at Laurier actually we have a sales club, we have a finance club, we have a supply chain club, but nothing with e-commerce. And we felt that we should be bridging that gap over there.
Yep.
So I thought that'd be a good idea to join this club as well.
Okay.
One of my peers is the president of the club, and I am the vice president of external events. So I guess my job is to reach out to people and experts in the industry and hear more about their experience and expertise within e-commerce.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's it definitely needs to be getting more of a voice these days for sure. I
Yeah,
think going back, thinking back to when I went through school, I remember so many people, there's a certain allure to like finance because you think, oh, you're working close with money, you can make a lot of money, but like, the fact of the matter is, if you're good at what you do, you can do anything you want. And if you want to participate in this new digital world, it's a really fun place to be.
yeah, 100%. I completely agree with you on that. So I was just looking a little bit at your LinkedIn, and I noticed that you were also an MBA graduate at Laurier. So maybe you could walk us through a little bit about your experience at Laurier and how it shaped your career. Oops.
We're back. We're back.
Oops. Okay. Perfect. Sorry for the internet problems again,
No,
but
it's all good.
yeah,
It's all good. Not your
yeah.
fault.
But so I was going to ask you. So I was looking at your LinkedIn page, and I noticed
Hmm.
that you were an MBA graduate at Laurier. I think
Yep.
was it between 2015 and 2017?
Yep.
Or
Yep.
yeah, perfect. So I guess my first question would be regarding your experience at Laurier as an MBA graduate. How did it help you shape your career, and how was your experience just generally at a university like Laurier?
Yeah. It's an interesting question, right? I mean, so
Mm,
I would start with this. We live in a weird sort of time in Canada where a lot of people actually don't know this stat. We are the most educated population in the world, which means that every degree produced in Canada is worth less here than it is
Yep.
anywhere else in the world. It's
Yep.
a very competitive education market. If you go to other places, I had a company in Australia for a little bit, and it was remarkable. Like people, around my age, I would
Yep.
say probably half of them had a degree and half of them did college and became carpenters or became, picked up a trade of some sort. So, whereas here, pretty much everybody I know did at least an undergrad, if not more. Sorry,
Mhm.
I don't know if this is frozen again.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it just got frozen. I think right now. Can you still hear me? Or okay, I think we are back again.
I think
Oops.
we're back. What did you last hear?
Just I was actually I heard what you said that we are one of the most educated countries in terms of education. So I read something similar that when you adjust it on a per capita basis, you have the highest level of bachelor degrees per capita
Yeah.
in Canada. So there's so much supply of graduates, so it kind of reduces the value of it, and so you need to really differentiate yourself apart from your degree because millions of people are
Well,
coming out with degrees.
you know what? So I was just going to go into that by saying, that's why I did the MBA. I think, what is more important and what you can really differentiate, like at the end of the day, yes, the education is great. I think an MBA helps you more later in your career when you're
Hmm.
trying to move up the ladder. But I think in terms of starting your career, an MBA is marginally different than an undergrad in business. I don't think
Hmm.
it's that different. I think really the people that shine are the ones that not only get good grades, but really, and not only do you have nice extracurriculars. Those are the two standard buckets that everybody talks about.
Hmm.
But they're the people that find unique work opportunities, whether that
Hmm.
be volunteering or actual work.
Right.
And I think it's just part of it is that it demonstrates your ability to get creative with trying to find new and interesting ways to work. Like, as opposed to, there's nothing wrong with holding a regular summer job doing whatever, but if you can intern at a place or get to know somebody, bump into somebody, be the type of person that bumps into somebody at a Starbucks and hits up a conversation and creates an opportunity, that those people, in my experience, are the ones that get the most remarkable opportunities. So when I look at the graduating cohort of my class, I mean, some people absolutely went on to do some excellent things, but it was hard for other people in the class, and it was really more determined by the individual and what they brought to the table in terms of their it really wasn't so much their intelligence as much as it was their perseverance, their desire to try to make opportunities as opposed to have them come to them and wait for them. So those types of things really, I think for students looking at graduating into a tough job market, those are the things that for people that are going to look for an opportunity or try to create an opportunity or make relationships, there's always going to be opportunity for those people.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, even recently I had a change of mind. Getting good grades is great, but you need to really even differentiate yourself outside the classroom. If it's not more important than in classroom, it's at least equally important, because it really shapes you as an individual.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, you're going to learn more on the job anyway than you will in class. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good primer. I would say though, in terms of skills that business students can really benefit from right now, it's technological skills.
Yeah.
One of the things that, so I have like a sort of way of thinking about this, which is like, in the 1980s, it
Right.
was, you're going to have to learn how to type 100 words a minute. That's going to be the standard for
Right.
business people, right? And then in the 90s, it was sort of, you got to learn Microsoft Word and Excel. And that sort of carried out through the 2000s and the 2010s. But I think tomorrow's business professional won't be able to get by without some pretty solid coding skills around, some sort of beyond just Excel, because we're dealing with data sets today that are so large that Excel can't handle it. And you need some solid statistical understanding, sure, but more importantly, the skills with the technology to be able to do something with it. So
That's definitely interesting. Yeah, I know coding is it's really like pervaded in the business and in the analyst sector as well.
yeah, and it's cool because you can create a portfolio. Like
hmm,
you can anybody can create a GitHub page and put together a portfolio of your work, so you don't have to. So instead of just putting your LinkedIn on your resume so people can check that out, you put your GitHub link down as well, and they
yeah.
can see what you built. That's an option available to anybody. So it's kind of awesome. It's an awesome new world because that's another way you can differentiate yourself. Lots of software developers know how to code, but not very many business grads do.
Exactly. That's a thing, right? So I was thinking that if someone want to take a DIY approach to learn coding, what is the first software someone should start off with? Maybe just learn from
Well,
YouTube or.
yeah, well, so it's a good question. I mean, I've been coding now for since about 2012.
Hmm.
I started with Python,
Okay.
and the reason, like, I did when I got into it, I didn't know what language to choose, so I chose the one that sounded the coolest, like a snake. But looking back, it was the right choice because a lot of the languages today are really useful for software development purposes. If you're trying to make an app or you're trying to make, some sort of product. But for business grads, the thing that is really important is, again, that sort of data analysis, data sciencey kind of stuff. And Python is hands down the language for that. It's got the most support for machine learning, AI applications, but also just dealing with interesting and complex data structures. So I would start with Python. There's a couple of resources that you can check out. DataCamp is a really good place to start if you like a more structured approach. It's about $150 a year, so it's versus like university and whatever. It's so cheap, and you get access to like tons of courses that way. I personally didn't like the structured approach because I found that while it was interesting and you're kind of doing a bottom up approach where it's like, oh, this is like there is a little bit of like maybe a 2 month period where you just have to learn stuff. But
Yeah.
after that, you got to start playing around with projects, building stuff that you find interesting and learning the how to do it along the way. And Google has solutions to everything. Sometimes it's really helpful to watch YouTube videos. Sometimes it's helpful to have data camp. But by far, like, just go build stuff and then you'll learn a lot of skills along the way.
Yeah, that's interesting. You brought up, the prevalence of data science today in the age of information today, right? So
Yep.
I also noticed that you were an analyst at Rogers before, so predictive modeling, statistical analysis. So
Mhm.
did that kind of role give you an advantage or an edge when switching to a pure e-commerce based role?
Yeah, I would say it still has yet to give me an edge on that. It's not that it didn't. but I think the important way to tell that story is that I got that role because I'm interested in statistics and math and
Yeah.
predictive analytics. And so it's sort of the way that I look at the world is through sort of distributions and populations and, statistical significance and things like that. So it sounded like an interesting role. And whether it be in a marketing role like I've had in the past, or it be in that predictive analytics role, like I'm taking a statistical approach to whatever I do, because you can, that's a cool thing about the way that math maps onto the world, is that you can use it for anything.
Yeah.
It's the person that understands it deeply enough to be able to look at some marketing problem over here about segmenting your customer base and
Yeah.
say, hey, there's a thing called the clustering algorithm you can use for that. And that person's incredibly valuable, because in the past, a lot of these types of like roles, marketing roles and so forth, were so much more relationship driven.
Right.
Now they're so much more analytical. And in industries like mine, it's a race and people don't know where to start. Like you just mentioned, like how do you get started with code? Like industries, giant companies that you and I both know are at the same stage where they've brought in the math PhD, but they don't know how to make the most use of them. And the math PhD doesn't know their industry. So there's a disconnect and nobody to connect them and say, oh, hey, math person, here are our things that we really care about. And I know your tools, so I can ask you to do these things. That hasn't happened yet. So that's, again, why I think business students really benefit from a pretty deep statistical understanding, some solid coding skills. Nothing crazy. You don't have to be a master's in mathematics or a software developer. You literally just need a couple years experience and build a couple of cool things with some AI or something, and you'll understand it to a degree that puts you 80% ahead of the competition. So
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you said there's sometimes a disconnect between the employee and the firm because they don't know how to leverage each other's advantages, and there's like a gap between both of them, right? So do you
you
think
sound
it's
like a business student. The
yeah,
firm.
yes, I am business student. If I can't use the jargon now, when
Yeah.
will I be able to use it?
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So yeah, no, and it's a common problem, right? Again, if you're mathematically minded, these types of problems don't really compute, because it's like, so the skills exist, the people who can build this stuff exist, but it's not making its way into an industry for one reason or another. Why is that? And it's like, well, because the people in the industry that control all the dollars don't know how to spend them well. So you see this in job descriptions, where a
Right.
company like Google knows how to hire a software developer. They don't ask for 16 languages and 1 year experience. They ask for you to know one language and basically show that you're an interesting person, and that's it. They'll interview you. For companies that don't know what they're doing, they ask, hey, what are our technologies? Okay, we have 15 languages. We got to learn. We need somebody who knows all of that, but we're not going to overpay for it. So we need somebody who's basically a new grad, and then they get disappointed and doubt the power of tech because they haven't set it up right. So like you see that across a lot of industries. It's not just my industry. You see that across a lot of industries, and it's a powerful like insight to have in your pocket and skill to have in your pocket if you want to go into a traditional business role and have some of those skills, because like a lot of roles today can be automated if you know just a bit of coding as well. So
Yeah. Do you think that the disconnect is also partly attributable to AI and data mining being in its nascency? So it's kind of a new concept, and people don't really understand what they're doing.
here's the thing: the math on this stuff isn't new.
Okay.
The math of AI has been around since the 50s.
Okay. Yep.
It's the computer power. So it's the CPU, GPU power that we have today that has made it powerful.
Yep.
But the mathematical methods have been understood for a very long time. We just haven't been able to fully capitalize on them because we haven't really had digital like channels like we're here to talk about, e-commerce and digital marketing, to be able to collect giant insight sets and then analyze them and deploy algorithms on them. So I do think, though, you're right, which is that everything's got a maturity curve.
Yep.
You know, this is definitely at its infancy in terms of how the masses understand it. But we already see the biggest companies in history, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, Netflix, these types of companies are this is all they do. This is all
Yeah.
they've done from their beginning. So it sort of, from my perspective, it looks like some of these sort of older industries don't know that
Yeah.
the Microsofts and Googles of the world are running 40 years ahead of them, and
Yeah.
they're not going to catch up because they don't even know they're in a race.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what it appears like to me. But it's an interesting question. I think that the power of the technology, I think the opportunity for the student today who wants to start a company potentially is understand these tools, work in an industry for a few years, and build a tool that serves that industry directly. It's the opportunity, the low hanging fruit is such that you don't need a 25-year career in software development to
Yeah.
make a very profitable startup. And I mean, it's remarkable how much money agencies are charging firms for the their AI services and basic programming.
Yeah, that's actually really insightful for sure. So then bringing back to the present, what is your current role, and can you tell us a little bit more about Dare Foods Limited?
Yeah, so I'll start with Dare Foods, awesome company in Canada. So they're in the food industry. For those who don't know, in Canada, the food industry is mostly filled with multinational corporations. So, and
Right.
they're usually American, but not always. Some of them are European. Um, and what Dare is a unique example. There's only a handful of them of a Canadian-owned, always has been Canadian-owned food company. It's been around for 126 years, 27 years now. So it's been around for a very long time. It's owned privately by a local family here. And that definitely creates some really interesting opportunities because unlike a shareholder held company where you have quarterly results to hit, the privately owned element of this enables us to basically, make provisions for the long term. So it's a pretty interesting company from that perspective. They sell some pretty mainstream products such as like Bear Paws cookies. They're pretty
Okay.
popular in Canada. They have Breton crackers. They have Leslie Stowe Fine Crisps, which are sort of in Whole Foods markets and things like that. Those are some of the main brands. They have some pretty big brands in Quebec that are not as big out here in sort of English Canada. So they've done a really good job building that. So that's been, it's been an excellent history for them. In terms of my role at Dare Foods, so I'm the associate e-commerce manager. I'm the go-to person on e-commerce for the entire company. I am the only person on the e-commerce side, but I have two counterparts that are on the digital marketing side, and we work pretty closely together. My main objective is to identify the unfolding opportunities in the e-commerce channel in grocery that we could better leverage to drive profits, especially around COVID. So.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so as you said, you were in a very statistical and mathematically based role at Rogers. So what inspired you to venture into the e-commerce field and make such a different switch?
Well, I think the managers at the company kind of saw that I had this interest. As I said, no matter what role I'm in, I'm kind of thinking about things in a statistical kind of way. I was in a less statistical role in a sense because I was in innovation, and innovation's tough because nobody's got a crystal ball, and predictive math doesn't work so well on product launches when a company like, or in my industry, you might launch a new product maybe a few every year, but you don't have enough sort of sample to make any kind of inferences about it. So anyways, I think everybody saw, hey, this guy's interested in technology. He's using interesting technologies to try to do things. This digital channel is filled with things like algorithms and, technologies that not everybody is very comfortable with. Let's see what he can do on that desk. And so, I didn't ask for the opportunity directly, but I did express passive interest in it, and ended up coming my way, and I took it because it was, it's also an exciting sort of time. I'm at basically the infancy within Dare on this channel, and
Yeah,
it's I get to kind of shape it the way that I see fit. So there's a ton of autonomy, ton of leadership ability. We're going to be building a team soon, so it's awesome.
that's great. So, you were also previously a brand manager at Dare Foods
Mhm.
Limited. And so in your current role, you said you're the only person on the e-commerce team. So do you find a need to, liaison with the brand management team as well so that both of you on the same page?
Well, the thing about e-commerce is it actually touches every function of the company. It touches finance, it touches supply chain,
Yeah.
marketing, certainly. Um, to begin this journey, I was working with marketing like all the time. I've been working with marketing all throughout 2020 to try to get this channel where it needs to be, because one of the starting points for e-commerce is getting imagery, copy, content, all that stuff sort of sorted out before you can really move on to the more statistical stuff.
Yeah.
So I work with marketing on a daily basis for sure. And then supply chain is interesting because it's a completely different customer than Walmart, Loblaws, Sobeys, those types of customers. So it requires some special attention there. And then from a financial perspective, Amazon in particular, and other e-commerce accounts are present some unique challenges from a financial perspective. So we have to make sure we're managing that too. So I absolutely I'm the manager of that
Yeah.
channel, but I interface with every function.
Okay, that's great. So I guess one of my other questions would then be, so what advice would you give students who are trying to break into e-commerce, and any skill sets they can acquire to give them an edge? I noticed you mentioned coding. Is there anything else which they can perhaps do?
Yeah. So here's the thing is that you absolutely, it's helpful to learn how to code, but it's more helpful to actually build things. So that's kind of the major thing there. If so, give you a couple of example coding projects that I would find interesting on a resume would be web scraping. If you can build a web scraper that pulls pricing from Amazon or product images from Amazon and does it on some sort of interval like every day or so, and stores it into a database, that's a very impressive project. If you've done that and you've had no years, like you have to sort of put yourself in the shoes of the hiring manager. Um, if you're hiring somebody with no experience in it, then you look for a demonstrated interest in it. And if somebody is part of an e-commerce club, that's great. But you always are going to value what they've done over what they've shown interest in. And so if you can demonstrate that you've done something relevant to it, such as like like I remember when I was interviewing for jobs before I ever got with Dare Foods, like I had done sort of a similar project on. I'd done some scraping on some language data for a consulting firm that I interviewed with, and I brought them basically my output of it and a laptop so I could show them how it works and all the rest. And it was a clear, like I got the offer. I didn't end up going with that company, but I got the offer for that job, and it was it was they said it was because of that kind of, not just a resume and a face. It's, hey, here's something that he's done in application of this job. Like you don't have to know exactly what the job specifically is, but even if do a quick analysis, like if you put together sort of a review of one of the company's competitors, like I don't know, like an example for me would be if you go to like Halo Top's website and
Right.
you do an analysis of their cookies to show what data they're collecting and where it's going, and what kind of information they're likely mining to try to figure out some insights about their visitors and how that whole funnel works, I'd be very impressed again. So these are all things that you can do when you have any spare time as a student that can actually distinguish you from people who have 1 to 2 years experience but have just been showing up to work and doing what they're told. This is going above and beyond, and demonstrating going above and beyond is what gives you what pushes you over that bar of those job applications that say minimum 3 years experience. That's how you get over it. Is you've not just done like an analysis or something that is a bit like a school report, but you've done something where it's like, hey, if this was my business and it was my money and I'm trying to make money through X company, whatever their business is, here's how I would approach it from a unique
Yeah.
angle, something that I don't think you're doing right now. I'm going to look at cookies of your competitors, or hey, I notice you're collecting location information, I would pull that in and see how can we associate that with X, Y, and Z, and let me show you some technology that can do that. That kind of thing where it's not just, hey, here's a problem, but hey, here's a problem and here's the technology for the solution, or here's a creative way of solving the problem. Those are the types of things where it's like, okay, we've got somebody who is trying to get a start, may not have any experience, but has clearly shown that their interest is there, and their intelligence and everything that you kind of look for in somebody who's ambitious, wants to work hard and make some big leaps in your organization. Those are the types of things I look for sure.
That's very interesting. So just hypothetically speaking, if just say a fresh graduate, maybe he's 21, 22 years old, he's just finished a bachelor's degree, say in business maybe, and he's interviewing for just say a junior e-commerce, a junior e-commerce analyst role. Do you think the employer would test the person more on his technical skill set or more on his soft skills, or would it be a fair mix of both?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So definitely I'm talking a lot about technical skills and brushing over the soft. I shouldn't be doing that. To be honest, it's important to be able to communicate well. But I don't think that it needs to be overthought. Like, there are those roles out there, like hardcore sales roles with big contracts, and you need to be a really good negotiator. But for most of day-to-day business, the best skill you can develop is to take something that's really complicated and explain it really simply. If you can do that on whatever it is, even your story when you tell your resume, or if you're, like I just mentioned, talking about a technology, if you can step back and say, and don't go into the equation for a regression analysis, but step back and say, like, does the past predict the future? Do you think it does? If I've seen that there is a squirrel on that tree every day at 8 a.m. and then I wake up, can I predict with some certainty that there's a squirrel, right? You start to tell the story, you start to simplify it. You're not getting into the weeds of this is Python code and here's some iterators. You're getting into what are we trying to do from a high level? And that brings everybody in and more opens them up for some of the details. So if you're in an interview or trying to basically like get a basic like analyst job or something like that, it's important when you tell your story and when you talk about your interest in e-commerce, you keep it high level, and then you have the knowledge to be able to go into depth on the things that the interviewer is interested in. So there is a balance between soft and hard skills. I don't know if I answered that very directly, but this idea that you can be just a technical person who doesn't talk to anybody and isn't sociable, that person won't do very well. In fact, I would say if you only have soft skills or hard skills, probably soft skills are going to get you in the door more easily. However, I think if you really want to make progress wherever you start, you absolutely need both. And I think that soft skills are easier to get to at like a satisfactory level in terms of just the way you talk to people and being personable, but beyond all of that, just being able to explain things very simply and explain what you need very simply. Once you get there, like there's sort of a passing grade there, but then the technical stuff, there's just levels to it and it just never stops. You can just keep finding new levels to it. And every new level you find is a new advantage that you have, not just versus your competitive set, if you're trying to say get a promotion, but also in your industry. If your ultimate goal is to make your company successful, these types of tools are things that really enable you to make leaps over your competition. So
yeah, that's really interesting. So it's interesting because in the last 10 years or so, we have seen a huge exponential growth in e-commerce. That's also been exacerbated but in the pandemic and the situation we are in today. So where do you really see the e-commerce industry in the next decade? Do you think it's highly saturated in North America right now, or do you think there's still room to grow?
It's definitely not saturated, and the way that you can tell that is that people still go to stores. It's important to kind of think about, hey, it like the occasions that people still do. People still go out to the grocery store. Some people go to the grocery store and get them delivered into their car, but still most people go into the grocery
Yeah.
store. For shopping malls or clothing, like yeah, definitely. Like it's like those are industries where they've had more progression on e-commerce than food. But is it saturated? I don't think so. It's not saturated until everybody buys 100% of their clothes online, for instance. We're certainly not at the point where people are buying cars online. I mean, Tesla's an example where you can do that, but really most car companies, that's not the case. So, like when is it going to reach its saturation point? It's a good question because it's really dependent on where the culture goes. If people get to the point where they realize, like, hey, I'd rather get some time back and do my shopping online on Amazon or on Loblaws or whatever it is, or on Aritzia or whatever you're trying to buy, people would rather do that and have it show up at their door more and more and more, which is what I personally think is going to happen. Then they'll be more choosy about where they go out to enjoy things. So I think, there was a big conversation like the 90s and well, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, where Walmart in particular was like wiping out small towns because
Right.
a Walmart would come in, it would beat every small business on price, and a whole downtown core would go out of business. And now I think you're probably going to see the opposite, where we're going to see these distribution centers of these giant companies, out in business parks and areas that nobody really drives through very often. And then the main areas that everybody actually goes out to are going to be restaurants and, boutique grocery stores and places where you go for an experience. So if you think about all the places that you go where you're not expecting an experience. So I don't know, like an outlet mall or like, I don't know, like a grocery store, I honestly comes to mind as well, or things where you're just exchanging money for like a very, a utility that you need. I think those are going to go away and come online more and more and more. Like if you need a coffee cup, do you really want to go down to like the Bay or something, or to Costco and search through that and spend an afternoon kind of, checking that out? Or would you rather just quickly scroll through some on Amazon or something and buy that? So over the next decade, I think you're going to see more of that sort of pragmatism where it's like, if it's not something that I'm doing to enjoy, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go. Alternatively, like if it's something where like a movie theater, people are still always going to love to go out for movies. The Netflix home theater idea. Yeah, it's great. There's still magic to going out to the movies. A nice dinner, a nice, go out for like even some fast food. That's still going to be around. Absolutely. But it's an interesting question as to whether or not Skip the Dishes and Uber Eats and some of these services are going to take that over. But I think one of the things that is difficult to predict is which companies today currently don't have an experience in their store and are going to create one. Like there, you could argue there's a bit of a experience if you go into like a Nike store where it's just Nike everything. Certainly if you go into like a Rolex store, that's an experience, and they try to make it that way. I think what you might start to see is some of the lower cost items like a Nike versus a Rolex, right? They're going to try to create an experience in store. And I think some of the ways that we're seeing that already is you can go online and buy whatever you want from Nike, but you can go into some of their concept stores and you can go to like a machine, a 3D printer that'll 3D print you out a unique pair of sneakers, right? Those types of things will get people in the store, because the challenge is when we see this in my business as well, when you go online and you have a grocery list, like people plan out their groceries way better than when they go into stores. So they're way less impulsive. There's no impulse online. And that changes the behavior patterns completely. You're not at the store and just staring at like a candy bar at the checkout. It doesn't happen. So how do you get that impulse back into people's lives? I think you have to get them out of their houses and get them just browsing kind of aimlessly and kind of see things that catch their eye. And that's really hard to simulate online. It can happen sort of through browsing on social media, but of course, we all try to skip ads. There are ad blockers. There's issues with that. So it's an interesting question. I love talking about this stuff.
That's really interesting because you brought up the point, if you're not going to the store, then there's lack of impulse purchases because you're so much more disciplined when you're buying your groceries online. So you cannot really take advantage of the strategic product placement and get the higher margins on products which grocery stores typically want you to buy. Uh, but yeah, I think that for premium goods, you can really differentiate yourself through in-store service, but maybe for economy and utility goods, perhaps the online channel will continue to grow.
Yeah, for sure, and it'll level out somewhere. But it's still, I mean, this year in grocery, depending on the category, it grew anywhere from 150 to 400%. So like it's going to grow. It's going to continue to grow. I think people have discovered the convenience of it. The people that hadn't used it before. I think people are creating habits around it now, especially again, like, you know, typical research shows, for instance, that people hate grocery shopping. They hate the experience of it. There are some people that like it, but mostly people hate doing it. And so it seems that sort of e-commerce has come in and swooped in and made that easier on people, and a lot of people really like it. And so yeah, we'll see where it goes. But I think it's really going to be dependent on what you sell. It's going to be dependent on how long the sales cycle is. Like the sales cycle for a pack of gum is nothing.
Yeah.
The sales cycle for a house is a little longer. So like are we going to get to the point where it's all virtual tours and you buy a house on the other side of the world, or is it going to be some sort of hybrid model, at least for the time coming? I think it's probably going to be a hybrid model, but the question then becomes, is it 80% e-commerce, 20% bricks and mortar? I don't know. I think the real question for this next decade is e-commerce going to overtake bricks and mortar in certain areas? And I think in the next decade, I don't think it'll get there, but it might. It's hard to know. 10 years is a lot can happen.
Yeah. Like, do you think that pure brick and mortar businesses can still survive, or will they become redundant? Or do you think they still need to have an online channel, even if it's just supplementing their offline channel?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, there's so much cost involved in a brick and mortar business, but most of the cost in brick and mortar business is supply chain. So if we look at like a business model like Amazon, they still have a ton of the cost that every other retailer does, because they still have to build distribution centers that hold all the product. They still have to be able to ship all that product. There's a ton of cost in that stuff. Is it a more efficient model? For sure. For sure it is. It's a more efficient model, though, mostly for the consumer. So again, so if we think about this through like a bit of a economics lens, the perfectly efficient consumer is one that finds all the deals on all the products that they care about all the time. What a brick and mortar store does is it interrupts that efficiency, and sort of you might go into a store and not need hot sauce, but it might be on deal, and you won't ever discover it because you're not going down that aisle.
Yeah.
Whereas, on Amazon, there's no effort in walking down the aisle. There's, you might just quickly check if there's a deal and sort of maximize that. So I know that sort of doesn't really go back to your question of, will brick and mortar survive? But I think anything that serves the customer ultimately better, the consumer better, are going to win over time. And like I said, I think retail stores that deliver a great experience are going to survive just fine. I think some of the ones that don't and are kind of just everywhere, like they're going to struggle a little bit for sure. Yeah. But like, again, it's so category dependent. Like you're going to go to Home Depot to get building supplies or home hardware because like you don't want that shipped to your door. That doesn't even make sense. The shipping's going to be so expensive.
Yeah, no, I definitely put you a little bit on the spot. It was a really vague question. I just like hearing different perspectives from different people about where they think the e-commerce industry
The
is
broad
going.
questions are always the most fun.
Yeah, because you can really like take it the way you want to. I feel it gives you more direction and freedom. So I like to ask open-ended questions typically.
Cool.
But yeah, I think honestly, I guess one last question, this small question would be, what inspires you to be the best version of yourself in your personal life and in your professional life?
It's an interesting question. I think one of the premises under that question is important, which is that you should, right? It's not clear today like and everybody's different, obviously, and everybody's got their
Yeah,
own stuff going on. But broadly speaking, if you don't try to do that, a lot of things you struggle recurringly with a lot of the same stuff. So
yeah,
um, to me, I guess it's a bit of a pragmatic thing where it's like I don't want to the things that I struggle with today. I don't want to be constantly struggling with. I don't want them to be habits that I carry on for a decade or two. I just don't want to be dealing with the same problems all the time. I want to, break through a wall and then find new problems I have to deal with just to kind of keep it interesting. And to me, you have to push the bleeding edge of something in order to break through walls and find new levels. And for me, it's mostly, it hasn't been, I think one of the things that is important to call out is it hasn't been grinding 100% of the time. That
yeah,
narrative is out there like crazy. That's not it. For me, what drives me is curiosity. I'm just so curious about sort of what could be that I try to map out sort of interesting ways to get to the edge of what we can do right now to try to quickly see what can be next. And that's what keeps me engaged and interested. And then you can get a bit obsessive over that. But I think everybody's wired differently. I get curious about things. I know some people that are just workhorses and they just get fired up by working to make something as perfect as possible. And school really rewards those people because, rather than sort of following what you find just interesting and doubling down on that, especially at the undergrad level, where you might put less effort into this project and more into this because this is more interesting.
yeah.
Those people just love dotting their T's and crossing their T's and dotting their I's. And everybody's wired different. So I think everybody's got to find their way to get to the next level and trying to pursue that. But there's a big diversity in how people do that. Some people, like I said, workhorses, some people curious, some people just very interested in a certain set of ideas or subject matter. Some people just love the game. Some people love working with other people and winning together. Sometimes it's a teamwork aspect that brings people together. So I think my answer in short would be whatever gives you that sort of sense in your spirit, so to speak, that makes you come alive a little bit. Just whatever that is, kind of try to bring that about as often as possible, and you'll have more fun while you do whatever you do, and you'll do better at it as well.
Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, for sure. I guess on my end, that's all the questions I have. Do you have any questions for me?
Uh, I don't have too many questions. I guess the only question that really came to mind was when I was at Laurier, I wish there was an e-commerce club. When did you
Yeah.
guys get started?
So yeah, actually, so my friend, he actually founded the club. So he's the president of the club, and this happened this semester. So I would say around September, because that's when I applied for this role. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it was also during the pandemic. I guess it seemed really relevant.
Mm-hmm.
The only issue right now is that we don't really have that we have zero in-person meetings, so it's hard to gain traction and
Right.
followers on our social
Right.
media handles. But we're hoping it'll bear fruits in the future. I mean, I know we'll be graduating soon, but someone can take it forward and
Mm-hmm.
change the future of this club as well. But right now, it's again in its nascency. But yeah, again, we just saw a gap. There was no e-commerce club. We were like, there's a finance, there's a sales club, there's a supply chain club. There's so many clubs, but e-commerce is such a relevant industry today. And it's not a niche industry. Everyone uses e-commerce in their personal
Mm-hmm.
lives, at work. And so we thought that why shouldn't we also have a club regarding e-commerce and build some awareness about that? Because a lot of people have shown interest in e-commerce roles. A lot of
Totally.
Laurier alumni do work at e-commerce roles. So it just seemed like a really interesting initiative. Personally, on my front, why I wanted to be part of this club is because I felt perhaps during the pandemic, I'm in my fourth year of university. I felt,
Mm-hmm.
how can I further improve myself? I'm going through the motions right now. I'm doing school, but everyone is doing school. What else can I do to differentiate myself and keep my mind active as well? That's one of the
Yep.
reasons I want to take a more challenging position. I thought it would really help, not just on
Mm-hmm.
my resume. That's maybe slightly superficial, but even personally
Yep.
on how I see things.
No, for sure, for sure, and that's awesome. So, what are your goals before you graduate with this club?
Yeah, my goal is basically, maybe to foster new leadership roles. Someone who can take it forward after we graduate. Maybe we might not
Mm-hmm.
be able to give the same amount of time when you become an alumni of Laurier.
Yep.
So we
Yep.
actually have a couple of people. We're trying to recruit more directors of the club as well, try to
Mm-hmm.
examine and scan their leadership potential and what they want to do in the future. So right now, again, it's a little far to think about what's going to happen to this club in the future. But as of now, we're trying to make the best of it. Maybe try to help out people who are trying to create awareness. I would that's the first initiative, to create awareness, and then see where it goes from there.
And what kind of stuff do you guys do to try to make that, awareness lead to something like somebody joining?
So we have some social media handles on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So we try to push
Mhm.
facts, some daily snippets. We also try to give free giveaway prizes. If someone tags a friend on the comments, they can get a free Google Home Mini or a free Amazon gift card, something like that,
Yep.
just to keep it going. So it's been a little slow, but we are getting some traction. So hopefully, it'll work out well.
It'd be interesting if you guys, and this is just an idea that I came up with. It'd be cool if you guys did like a bit of an e-commerce. Again, like I go back to this idea. This is absolutely where the puck is going, if you will, to challenge the business students in the club to do like a contest. Again, it sounds like you have access to things that can get you some interesting prizes. Put together a contest where people can do an e-commerce challenge or a packathon of some sort where basically you get a bunch of business students together. You say, hey, you could call it hack Amazon. Your goal is to use whatever means necessary to get this information, and basically you set up the challenge so that people who can build a scraper are the ones that win. I mean, that kind of stuff would be really
Yeah.
interesting, and then maybe do some analysis on it. That kind of stuff. I mean, it's all about what your goal is with the club and what you want people who join the club to get out of it. If it were me, I would try to make people make it a place where people can come to learn the skills that are going to really develop them into good e-commerce managers in the future. And geez, there's just no better time than when you're in school
Yeah.
to start learning some of that stuff, putting some of these contests, you all of those along, you work in a code world, so that'd be kind of interesting. But it sounds like you've got a great start.
Oops, I think I just cut out a
We're
little
back.
bit.
We're good. We're
Yeah,
good.
but yeah, no. So I actually heard what you said about having a group of business students trying to solve a problem which is actually relevant in today's world. Like data
Yep.
scraping, building something of your own. So we
Yep.
actually had a similar idea to that. So maybe having a case competition where you get a bunch of
Cool.
students to solve, and maybe try to get a sponsorship package as well. So that's
Yep.
one of our future goals as well. So that's something we aim to do. It's a little difficult during
Yep.
the online world. It would have been ideal to do it pre-pandemic, but we're going to work with what we have and uh, do the best given our resources.
Totally. And I think the case language is the right way to go about it.
Yeah,
It can just be, and here's the thing is it doesn't have to be a giant thing. Like it could even be like to keep people engaged. It could be tiny, like 2 hours on a weekend, like
yeah,
kind of weekly kind of things where, it's little prizes, whatever budget you guys may or may not have, you just break it up into smaller increments and you run it
yeah.
consistently. And I think that's going to keep it top of mind for people. And that's going to also keep it interesting. What I'll do is I will send you just via LinkedIn. I'll send you my GitHub, and you
Okay,
can
perfect.
you can have a look at some of the stuff. I've got some of my projects up there, but I still have actually quite a few to upload that are local on my drive here. But I'll throw those up there so you can have a look. But just some ideas of some of the things that we're building at Dare, and I'm working on the side as well. So I'll send that to you. And again, I mean, if this is something that people find is very interesting, I mean, I think it'd be cool to just even just for your development. Of course, you could learn something small and then go teach it on a Sunday. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
To other people, and then I mean, you mentioned the resume thing. It's not shallow. It's relevant for your stage of life right now, and I think it would look solid on that, to say that you've actually taught the stuff. And again, you don't have to know everything there is to know. You just learn something small, you teach something small, rinse and repeat. I think that'll look great when you come to graduation.
Yeah, definitely. And also thanks for sending the resources. It will not only help me and the club, but also the surrounding community around us. So it'll be greatly helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries,
Yeah.
no worries. I'm just gonna get that over to you right now. Yeah, and then I'm trying to think of anything else I might be able to send you. Um, I can send you. Yeah, you know what? I'll shoot you over a couple of decks as well. Just I made a silly amount of reading already as part of school, but recently, just 2 weeks ago, I attended a digital e-commerce summit that typically happens every year in Toronto, and
Right.
has some incredible speakers. They left us with a Google Drive link. I'll leave that with you as well if you want to do any reading on that. Some
Perfect.
interesting sort of tip of the spear stuff from our industry. But as I mentioned before, it's not tip of the spear as far as the technology goes. A long way for the industry to catch up and learn, but I'll send that to you too. Um, just trying to think if there's anything else I might be able to help you with, but yeah. Anyways, we'll keep in touch, and
Yeah, for
this
sure.
has been a great call. Let me know if there's anything that you need from me, and I'm happy to help. And we'll go from there.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving, spending your time with me.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Have a
Thank you.
great Friday night, and good luck with the rest of school. It's certainly a weird time to be doing school, I'm sure,
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
anyways, good luck with it, and I'm sure it'll go well. And let me know if you need any help with the club or otherwise.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No worries. Talk to you later.
You too.